The time a president strong-armed a Federal Reserve chairman.
Marketplace Morning Report is supported by JLL, helping clients find, design, occupy, manage, and invest in commercial real estate solutions. JLL.com. JLL, see a brighter way.
I'm David Brancaccia from Los Angeles today. First news just now that hiring was weaker than expected in the month just ended. The headline is that payrolls grew by 142,000 people in August. But there's more. Economist Julia Coronado, founder of Macro Policy Perspectives, joins us from Austin. Hey, August, Julia, the month before, July also got revised down a lot.
That's right. We have downward revisions to prior months and a weaker than expected bounce back. So hiring is definitely slowing.
Talking weak using number of names on payrolls, but got to say the unemployment rate went down slightly today.
It did tick down, but it jumped up in July, so that was expected. It is a lot higher at 4.2% than at the start of the year when we were at 3.7%. So another sign of a cooling labor market.
Some cooling, but not terrible. But does this sign of weakness mean that you think interest rates might go down 0.25 percentage point week after next, or maybe even a half?
This is really a judgment call for Fed officials, and we'll hear from a couple of them this morning. Definitely rates are going down. They're going to be cutting rates through the fall. The question is how quickly. And there is an argument to be made for starting fast. But again, we'll hear from the Fed officials who make those decisions shortly.
All right. So you're saying there's a chance of 0.5%. Economist Julia Coronado also teaches at the University of Texas, Austin. Thank you. Checking markets. S&P futures are down 0.6%. And the bond market is up. The 10-year interest rate is down to 3.7%.
Marketplace Morning Report is supported by Bitwarden Password Manager. Bitwarden is designed to offer password security from any device at any location, securing both sensitive business information and personal accounts. Learn more at bitwarden.com. And by Schwab. Schwab offers investors choices like full-service wealth management, self-directed investing options, and trading on Thinkorswim. More at schwab.com.
Setting interest rates to keep inflation low and the job market healthy is hard for Team Federal Reserve, perhaps even more so during a presidential election year like this. The Fed's decisions are meant to be independent from politics, but Donald Trump has called for more of a say on Fed policy. And there's an example from history in which a White House tried to bulldoze a Fed chair, some say contributing to an economic mess. I'm joined now by Sebastian Mallaby, senior fellow at the Council on Foreign Relations. He's written about central bank independence and encroachments thereon in his book from 2016 called The Man Who Knew. Welcome.
Great to be with you, David.
This topic, Federal Reserve independence, has a habit of rearing its head during election years. I mean, the Fed influence where our economy is headed, at least they try, and all that has a role in how voters make their decisions at the polls. But in theory, the central bank in this country is supposed to be independent?
Yes. I mean, that independence is more a convention than a law. And it depends on the president choosing to respect the convention.
Yeah, and to be absolutely clear before we proceed further, the Federal Reserve and its current chair, Jay Powell, have said this year's election has no bearing on the decisions his team makes. But take us back to the early 1970s. Richard Nixon's working to get elected again. What was happening in the U.S. economy in 71, 72?
You saw the beginnings of what became known as stagflation, where you had both stagnation and inflation all at once. So it was a tough moment, not something to which leaders in the U.S. were accustomed because of the prosperity of the preceding couple of decades.
The Fed chair at the time was a man named Arthur Burns. And what did the Nixon people set out to do in 71?
They came up with this idea that they would pressurize the Fed chairman, Arthur Burns, by leaking a story to the media to the effect that whilst Burns was proposing wage and price controls for everybody else in the economy, for his own wages, he was demanding a 50% salary increase, and therefore was, hypocritical, unpatriotic, and despicable. And so this was an entirely made-up story, but they planted it in the press.
And just to give you a taste of this, this is another moment where President Nixon is speaking with Office of Management and Budget Director George Shultz, who many will remember as Secretary of State later in the career, about what they've told the Fed Chair Arthur Burns about what to do with monetary policy. Now, the first voice you'll hear is unmistakably Nixon's.
You feel as far as Arthur and money supply, we've got that about as far as we can turn it right now, have we? I mean, as far as my influence on him, that's what I'm really asking.
Yeah. Well, he said that they voted to increase it.
Does this pressure Sebastian Mallaby? Does it work? He's apparently come into line. Does he come into line?
He does. The White House arranged for one of Arthur Burns's PhD students, who was close to him, to go deliver the message that if you don't like this smear about you allegedly demanding a 50% pay rise, you know what you got to do, Mr. Chairman. And what you've got to do, of course, is lower interest rates and talk up the economy.
I get that the international consensus is that decisions on things like interest rates should not be influenced by politics, but there is a discussion that could be had about central bank independence. It's not all that democratic. I mean, we don't elect them.
Yeah, and I think the high point of central bank independence blew up with the financial crisis of 2008, because the experts did get it wrong. And I think that's opened the door since then to political populism, to attacks on institutions, to a decline of respect for expert judgment. And in that environment, which we are still in, I think there is more danger to Fed independence than there was in the heyday when people took it for granted.
Sebastian Mallaby is a journalist, author, and a senior fellow at the Council on Foreign Relations. The book we're talking about from 2016 is The Man Who Knew. Now, that one is focused not on Arthur Burns, but on a later Fed chair, Alan Greenspan. His latest book is The Power Law, Venture Capital, and the Making of the New Future. Sebastian Mallaby, thank you very much.
Great pleasure to be with you, David.
Now, that graduate student who goes to the Fed chair to deliver the word from the White House, Mallaby says, was none other than Alan Greenspan. From Los Angeles, I'm David Brancaccio, and we are from APM, American Public Media.